from K&R Railroad, and welcome to part number 2 of how to electrify your frog. Now, in the previous version, number 1, we talked about plastic frogs, particularly in the Atlas switches, but today we're going to talk about the Electrofrog and the Insulfrog, and how we're going to make these be like these. Now, if you remember in part 1, we talked about the Atlas switch and the part of the switch that is made of plastic. This plastic area here is a dead spot, and when trains run over it, your engine runs over it, the contact between it and the rails will be reduced because there is no connection there. And sometimes these become problematic points in that the train, the engine will stall there. And rather than bring in the sky hook and shake the table, which is no fun, takes the fun out of model railroading, then we need to eliminate those dead spots. And the way we did that is what you saw in part number 1, in particular for the Atlas switch. Now, there are other type switches that we're going to talk about in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at what is an Electrofrog type switch. This switch only has 3 conducting rails to it. It has an outer rail of one polarity. It has another outer rail of another polarity, the opposite polarity. And then we have the inner rails, which are all one conducting piece. So all this in the center here is one conducting piece. The way it gets this polarity is based on the way the point is switched. So if it's switched in this direction, it'll pick up polarity from this rail, and if it's switched in that direction, it'll pick up polarity from that rail. You can see there is some plastic in here, but it's only to keep the rails from spreading. So everything here is one conductor. Now on the end here, what you're probably going to do, if it's new going into your train set, this will probably end up being plastic rail joiners. The outer rails will all be metal rail joiners. Now there's a couple exceptions to these kind of connections, but that's for another discussion. So keeping in mind, there's only 3 parts to an Electrofrog type switch. Let's look at the Peco Insulfrog switch. Very similar to the insulated frog on the Atlas switch. Now, what they've done on this switch here is what we call a feed-through. A feed-through would be the rail before the frog feeds through to the rail after the frog. The rail before the frog feeds through to the rail after the frog. The center portion of the frog here is all floated, isolated. You can see there's some plastic pieces here that float the wing rails from the incoming rails, and you notice the frog point is plastic and that the 2 out exiting rails are not touching each other like they would in the Electrofrog switch. Now, if you look on the back side of the Peco switches, you can actually see the feed-throughs where they have wires there. We don't need to worry about those. So if you already have one of these installed in your set, you don't have to worry about removing it. The only thing you may have to do is worry about the plastic rail joiners you may have to put here, or just cut the rail so that you don't have any physical connection to the rest of your train set. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this center portion here all one conductor. And when we do that, we're going to pick up our polarity based on the way the switch points are switched. Again, when it's switched to one side, I'll pick up the polarity on one side, switch to the other, pick up the polarity from the other side. So if we make this all one piece in the center, all we have to do on this particular type switch with the feed-through switches would be to cover the entire frog with the metal foil, all the way from where it starts here, just before the plastic, and after the frog points. Usually I go to the edge of the wing rails, and by doing that, it makes it all one frog. And it's very simple to do. So watch video number 1. It gives you techniques on how to push the foil down into the grooves here so that it will make it all one particular frog connection. And that's all there is to it. Now you could do the same thing with the feed through on this switch as well. You can start the foil just before the connection and just after the connection so that you make these two center rails all one piece, and it will pick up its polarity based on the way the points are directed. Now, if you have issues with connectivity to the center two rails, you know, these are going to be plastic so that they're not connected. Then what you can do is you can connect a wire to the frog, to the foil that you put on the frog here, to a frog juicer or to connectors on the switch machine. Like the tortoise has some extra connections there that will allow you to polarize this center section. So that's another technique for doing the electrofrying of your frogs, is to make this all one metal piece, and the foil across here will allow you to do that. Now, if you have these already in your train set and these connectors are metal, the inner connectors are metal, and you don't want to cut the rail, then use the technique exactly how I did it in video number 1, where where it doesn't quite touch where it makes connections to the entering and exiting rails on the frog. So that's all there is to it. It's a real simple concept. So if you liked the video, I appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, please give me constructive criticism. I would definitely like to add it into my next video. Maybe it needs some more explanation somewhere I missed. And if you're interested in buying a piece of foil along with a piece of wire that's the proper gauge, it has to be a pretty thin wire to solder to it. You can't have a lot of heat right there when you're making that connection. Then if you email me at this email address right down here, I will be happy to respond. It's $2, and you'll get enough foil and wire to do 4 frogs for sure, maybe 6 or 8 frogs if you're very careful and conservative with the way you use your tape. So thank you.